Imagine standing on the front lines of, like, an apocalyptic war. I mean, the horns are blaring, weapons are drawn, and the air is just thick with dust and adrenaline.
Right. The tension is just absolute.
Exactly. And right at that exact second, right as the slaughter is about to commence, you have a complete, paralyzing, existential breakdown.
Just the worst possible timing for a panic attack.
Literally the worst.
Sure.
But it's not just a panic attack about dying, It's a total collapse of your understanding of the meaning of life, your duty, and, well, reality itself.
Yeah, it's the ultimate inconvenient moment for a crisis of conscience. I mean, everything stops. The entire world basically waits while one human being's internal architecture just entirely crumbles.
And that terrifying pause is exactly where we're setting up camp for today's deep dive. So, welcome.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so we're looking at excerpts from one of the most famous philosophical dialogues in human history, which is the Bhagavad Gita. But we aren't just reading it as a standard epic, right?
No, not at all. We are decoding this ancient conversation between a paralyzed warrior named Arjuna and the supreme being, Krishna, also known as Bhagavan.
Right, and we're looking at it through a very specific, highly influential lens. We've got a stack of sources here featuring the commentary of the ancient philosopher Adi Shankaracharya.
Which is a brilliant way to look at it.
It really is. The mission today is to unpack this not just as a story of an ancient war, but as a profound roadmap for navigating human sorrow, action, and ultimate liberation. And, real quick, we're also going to look at how Krishna explains the path of devotion, or Bhakti, which shows how this text makes spirituality super accessible just through love and surrender.
Yeah, that's such a vital part of the text. It's the heart of it, really.
Exactly. And hey, before we get too deep into the weeds, if you're enjoying our deep dives, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share your own reflections in the comments. We love reading what you guys think.
We really do.
So to really understand what Shankaracharya is doing here, we have to grasp the sheer audacity of his worldview, right? I mean, we were standing on the blood-soaked battlefield of Kurukshetra.
Yeah, you have two massive armies, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, facing off. It is a deeply physical, incredibly high-stakes political conflict.
But looking at it through Shankaracharya's eyes gives it a radically non-dualistic spin.
Which is quite the pivot from, chariot warfare.
Right. So let's define non-dualistic right out of the gate, because I know from reading through these sources that it's basically the linchpin for everything that follows.
It absolutely is.
When I hear non-dual, I just think, well, not two. But how does that actually apply to a guy sitting in a chariot holding a giant bow?
So in Shankaracharya's framework of Advaita Vedanta, which literally translates to non-dualism, the absolute conviction is that there is no separation between the ultimate reality of the universe and your innermost consciousness.
Okay, so like my true self is identical with the supreme reality.
Exactly. But the kicker, the part that makes this commentary so revolutionary, is his insistence that this true self does not actually do anything, like, ever.
Wait, it doesn't act at all?
No, it is just a silent, completely untouched witness to everything.
Wow. Which is an incredibly tough pill to swallow when you're reading a text about a literal bloody war.
It definitely creates a massive paradox.
For sure. But before we try to untangle the philosophical mechanics of a self that doesn't do anything, I want to back up a little. We need to establish the historical anchor for this text first.
Right. The timeline is super important here.
Yeah, because the source material spends a massive amount of time pushing back against some older Western assumptions regarding when and where this conversation actually took place.
It's a really vital foundation. For a very long time, Western scholarship operated on this assumption that a philosophy this sophisticated, specifically one featuring really profound concepts of devotion or bhakti, must have been influenced by post-Christian or post-Buddhistic thought.
Like they assumed India just imported these ideas later on.
Exactly. But the sources we're analyzing today methodically dismantle that whole idea.
Yeah, I was reading the section on the timeline, and the sheer antiquity they are claiming is just staggering. They are anchoring this battle at the end of an epoch called the Dvarpa Yuga.
Right, and the math they use places the start of the subsequent era, the Kali Yuga, at roughly 3102 BC.
30102 BC. That is so incredibly old.
It is. That specific date, February 18th, 3102 BC, actually is derived from some very complex astronomical calculations that marked the ascension of Pariksit, who was Arjuna's grandson, to the throne.
Wow, they pinned it down to the day.
Well, according to the traditional astronomical texts, yeah. Now, to be fair to the historical debate, not every single scholar agrees on that exact year.
Right, right. There's some wiggle room.
Yeah, some place the Kurukshetra war around 2566 BC, and others point to maybe 1931 BC. But the broad consensus among the historians cited in our sources leans toward the actual historical conflict occurring somewhere between 1400 BC and 1000 BC.
With the philosophical text solidifying a bit later. But even at the most conservative estimate, we are talking well over 1,000 years before the Common Era. That's way before Buddha, way before Jesus.
Correct.
So let's briefly map out the political explosive that triggered this war, just so you have the context of Arjuna's mindset. You have a blind king, Dhritarashtra.
Right. And because of his blindness, a throne passed to his younger brother, Pandu.
But Pandu dies really young, leaving behind sons the Pandavas, which includes our main guy, Arjuna.
But the problem is that the blind king's sons, the Kauravas, are led by this deeply resentful prince named Duryodhana, and he is entirely unwilling to share power.
Yeah, Duryodhana is basically the classic usurper. He orchestrates a coup, but not through military might initially. He does it through a rigged game of dice.
Right, which results in the complete disenfranchisement of the Pandavas. They get banished to the forest for 13 long years.
So Arjuna and his brothers spend 13 years in exile, essentially stripped of their royal identity, all because of this fraudulent gamble.
And when they finally return, having fully fulfilled the terms of their exile, they naturally ask for their rightful portion of the kingdom back.
And Duryodhana flat out refuses. I think the text says he wouldn't even give them enough land to drive a needle through.
Yeah, not even a pinprick of land. So that political stalemate is what eventually forces these two massive armies onto the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
And this brings us to Krishna's role, which is just a masterclass in narrative tension. Krishna is this revered, formidable warrior, recognized by many as an actual incarnation of the Supreme Bhagavan.
And both sides desperately want his help.
But Krishna takes a vow, right? He says he will not lift a single weapon in this war. He absolutely will not fight.
Yeah. Instead, he offers himself to Arjuna simply as a charioteer and a political advisor.
Which is brilliant. I mean, the Supreme Being is literally steering your vehicle, but entirely refuses to fight your battles for you.
It's a very powerful metaphor before the philosophy even begins.
Totally. But returning to the historical dating for a second, this is where the linguistic detective work in our sources really grabbed me. How do these sources prove that this text and its concepts of non-dualism and devotion predate Buddhism and Christianity?
Well, the most compelling evidence comes down to the mechanics of the language itself. Take the word nirvana, for example.
Right. I mean, if you grew up in the West, you almost certainly associate nirvana with Buddhism. Like it's the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path.
Exactly. And because of that, early Western translators assumed the Gita must have been written after the Buddha lived. But our sources point out a really crucial grammatical difference.
Which is what?
In the Gita, the word is actually compounded. It's Brahma Nirvanam.
Okay, and how does that change the meaning?
It changes the entire theological trajectory, honestly. Brahma Nirvanam means absorption into or identification with Brahman, which is the ultimate expansive supreme reality.
So it's a positive state of absolute fullness.
Yes. But later, Buddhist philosophy adopted the root word nirvana and utilized it to mean something closer to extinction or being blown out, like blowing out a candle flame.
Oh, wow. So the linguistic argument is that the concept existed in the older Hindu literature as a state of supreme union, and Buddhism later borrowed and redefined the term.
Precisely. It completely flips the script on who influenced whom.
And it's not just vocabulary, right? It's the actual syntax of the Sanskrit itself.
Yeah. The grammar of the Bhagavad Gita frequently uses archaic constructions that completely ignore the rules laid down by Panini.
Panini being the guy who basically wrote the book on Sanskrit grammar.
Right. Panini was the definitive ancient grammarian of Sanskrit, and he lived around the 6th century BC. If the Gita had been written after Panini, it would definitely adhere to his formalized rules because his grammar became the absolute standard.
Right. So the fact that the Gita violates his rules is pretty strong evidence that its language predates him entirely.
Exactly. We also have Greek historical records to back this up. Megasthenes was a Greek ambassador in India around 320 BC.
Oh, right, the Greek connection.
Yeah, he wrote about the locals in a city he called Mathura, worshipping a deity he called Heracles. Our sources connect Mathura to Mathura, which is the birthplace of Krishna.
And Heracles is connected to Hare Kalisa, which is another name for Krishna.
Right. So when you stack the astronomical dates, the pre-Panini grammar, the etymology of Brahmanirvanam, and the Greek historical accounts, the sources present a very rigid defense.
Yeah, this philosophy isn't some syncretic blend of later traditions. It is an indigenous, incredibly ancient roadmap.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we get up onto the chariot and into Arjuna's head, I really want to clarify something for you as you listen.
Good idea.
The text we are diving into is built upon ancient sociological frameworks, specifically rigid caste duties and the moral obligations of ancient Iron Age warfare. We are going to explore these concepts strictly to map the architecture of Arjuna's psychological breakdown and Krishna's philosophical cure.
Right, we're looking at the mechanics of the text impartially.
Exactly. That is an essential boundary to set. The goal here is to understand the nature of human suffering as presented in the text, not to endorse the political or social norms of the ancient world.
Definitely. We're reading this for the internal philosophy, not as a sociological endorsement.
All right, so let's zoom in. The historical context is set. We are on the chariot, the armies are arrayed, the conch shells have just been blown.
And the text says the sound was just tumultuous, echoing through the sky and the earth, literally piercing the hearts of the enemy.
So intense. And right then, Arjuna asks Krishna to drive the chariot right into the no man's land between the two armies. He wants to look at the faces of the men he is about to slaughter.
Which triggers chapter 1. And chapter 1 basically reads like a clinical description of a massive trauma response.
Yeah, it really does. When Arjuna looks across the battlefield, the reality of the political conflict just completely evaporates.
He doesn't see a faceless, evil empire. He sees his own grandfathers, like the revered patriarch Bhishma.
Right. He sees the teachers who taught him how to hold a bow in the first place, like Drona.
Yeah.
He sees his uncles, his cousins, his childhood friends.
And they are all standing there, weapons drawn, fully prepared to kill him and be killed by him.
And the way the text describes his physiological reaction is so visceral. It says his limbs become languid, his mouth goes completely dry.
He experiences horripilation, which is violent goosebumps. His skin burns intensely and his mind is just whirling.
He is holding the Gandiva, which is this legendary mythical bow, and he's shaking so bad it literally slips from his fingers.
What you're seeing is the autonomic nervous system completely rejecting the situation before the cognitive brain can even process it.
It's an acute fight-or-flight response, but he's frozen.
Exactly. But Arjuna is a seasoned general. He doesn't just pass out. He rationalizes his physical collapse by constructing this highly structured, elaborate moral argument for why he must refuse to fight.
Right, he builds a really compelling case. He turns to Krishna and says, I do not see any good to be derived from killing my own people.
He argues that he doesn't want the kingdom, not even if it extended over the 3 worlds, let alone just this earth.
And then he outlines this terrifying domino effect. He says that if you destroy the family unit in this war, you destroy the ancient traditional rights.
And without those rights, vice and corruption overpower the remaining family, leading to the corruption of women, which leads to the intermingling of castes.
Right. And the culmination of that domino effect, at least in Arjuna's ancient worldview, is that the ancestors fall into hell because there is no one left to perform the proper spiritual offerings for them.
So he envisions not just a political defeat, but the total cosmic ruin of his entire lineage.
And here is where I really struggle, because if you read Arjuna's argument today, he sounds like the only sane, moral person on a battlefield of bloodthirsty maniacs.
It's true, he does.
He's essentially saying, I refuse to butcher my uncles and teachers for a piece of real estate. Why does the text, and specifically Shankaracharya's commentary, frame this supposedly noble stance as a tragic breakdown?
It's a vital question. Shankaracharya's diagnosis of Arjuna is completely devoid of sentimentality. He doesn't look at Arjuna dropping his bow and say, oh, what a deeply compassionate soul.
Right, which is what we would probably say today.
Exactly. But Shankaracharya looks at Arjuna and says, this is the ultimate manifestation of sorrow and delusion.
Delusion? How is not wanting to murder your grandfather a delusion?
To understand Shankaracharya's commentary, we have to look at the root of Arjuna's fear. Arjuna isn't afraid of his own death. He explicitly tells Krishna he would rather stand unarmed and let the enemy strike him down.
Yeah, he's totally fine with dying.
His terror is rooted entirely in the concept of agency. Arjuna fundamentally believes, I am the body holding this bow, they are the body standing over there, I am the killer, they are the killed, I will be the author of this horrible sin.
He believes he is the one turning the gears of karma.
Yes. Shankaracharya argues that Arjuna's entire moral panic is born from ignorance. Specifically, the false identification of the infinite, untouchable true self with the temporary physical body and its fragile social relationships.
So Arjuna is all tangled up in the temporary identities of uncle, teacher, and cousin.
Precisely.
So Arjuna collapses in the chariot, fully expecting Krishna to validate his newfound pacifism. But Krishna does the exact opposite.
Which takes us into chapter 2, the philosophical meat of the text.
Yeah, Krishna doesn't offer a shoulder to cry on at all. He offers a shocking rebuttal that completely ignores Arjuna's moral domino effect and pivots the conversation entirely to cosmic reality.
Krishna's opening salvo is notoriously blunt. He tells Arjuna, "You grieve for those who are not to be grieved for. The wise mourn neither the living nor the dead."
I mean, if I am having an existential crisis and someone tells me the wise don't mourn the living or the dead,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be furious. It sounds incredibly cold.
It does sound cold initially, but how does Krishna justify that statement?
Yeah, how does he?
He justifies it by introducing the foundational ontology of Advaita Vedanta, the strict, uncompromising distinction between the real and the unreal.
Okay, real versus unreal.
According to this framework, if you don't know the difference between what is real and what is unreal, you are basically guaranteed to suffer.
I think we need to define how Shankaracharya uses the words real and unreal, because it's definitely not the way we use them in daily life.
Right.
When I say something is real, I mean I can touch it.
Yeah.
Like, this table is real.
Yeah.
But the text flips that completely upside down.
Yeah. In Shankaracharya's logic, the unreal is defined as anything that is subject to change. If it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, it lacks true independent existence.
So heat, cold, pleasure, pain, youth, old age.
Even the physical universe itself, they are all in a constant state of flux. And because they are temporary, they are classified as unreal.
And the real.
The real, conversely, is that which never ceases to be. It has no beginning, no modification, and no end.
And the text identifies this real exclusively as the self, right?
Yeah.
The observing consciousness.
Exactly.
The poetry used to describe the absolute invulnerability of this self is just stunning. It says it is unborn, eternal, undecaying. Weapons do not cut it, fire does not burn it, water does not moisten it, and air does not dry it.
It is entirely insulated from the physics of the material world.
Yeah.
Krishna uses a very accessible metaphor to explain this to Arjuna. He talks about changing clothes.
Oh, right, the clothes metaphor.
Just as a person discards a worn-out shirt and puts on a new one, the self simply discards worn-out physical bodies and takes on new ones.
Okay, I have to pause here.
Right.
Discarding a sweater doesn't involve my nervous system shutting down in agony. Death is visceral. It is violent. How does Shankaracharya expect a human being to genuinely equate the terror of dying with taking off a jacket?
That points exactly to the severity of the delusion Shankaracharya is trying to cure. The terror of death is entirely real to the ego, to the mind that believes it is the body.
Right. If you think you are the jacket, then ripping the jacket apart is terrifying.
Exactly. But Krishna outlines 6 specific material transformations that the physical body undergoes. Birth, existence meaning coming into a new state growth, transformation, decay, and finally, death.
And he categorically denies that the self experiences any of those 6 changes.
None of them.
So if the self doesn't grow, doesn't age, and doesn't die, well, it also means it doesn't act.
That is the inescapable logical conclusion of non-dualism. Because the self is changeless and partless, it cannot perform an action. Action requires modification.
Therefore, the concepts of I am the killer or I am killed are pure illusions.
Exactly. The self is a non-agent. Arjuna's agonizing guilt over being the destroyer of the family is based on the false premise that his true self is the one doing the destroying.
The commentary uses an analogy here that I found incredibly helpful for understanding how realizing this actually changes your moment-to-moment experience. It's the Mirage analogy.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, imagine you are wandering in a desert, dying of thirst. You see water in the distance. You are going to sprint toward it, exhausting yourself, completely desperate.
Driven by survival.
Right, but the moment you realize it's a mirage, just an optical illusion of light and heat, you stop running. The mirage might still appear to your eyes. The visual phenomenon doesn't vanish, but it no longer has the power to control your actions or cause you suffering.
It's a profound shift. Realizing the physical world is a changing illusion doesn't make the world physically disappear, but it stops you from being destroyed by its tragedies. Your relationship to the appearance is fundamentally transformed.
But this introduces a massive, glaring contradiction, and Arjuna, to his credit, spots it immediately.
He's very sharp.
He is. Because if the ultimate truth is that the self is a peaceful, actionless, eternal witness, Why on earth is Krishna demanding that Arjuna stand up, pick up his bow, and fight a brutal war?
It feels like a trap, doesn't it?
It totally feels like a trap.
Yeah.
Arjuna is deeply confused. He essentially says, if it is your opinion that this peaceful wisdom is superior to action, why then do you urge me to this horrible action of slaughtering my family? You are bewildering my understanding.
It's a very fair point.
How does Krishna reconcile telling a man he is an actionless spirit in one breath and commanding him to commit mass violence in the next?
To resolve this paradox, Krishna has to explain that there are two distinct paths, tailored to two completely different states of human realization.
Okay, so this brings us to chapters 3 and 4.
Right. There is the yoga of knowledge, known as Sankhya, which is reserved for the monks, the men of complete, unbroken realization of the self. And then there is the yoga of action, or karma yoga, designed for the unenlightened who are still entangled in the world.
And the expert commentary from Shankaracharya is incredibly strict about this division, isn't it?
Extremely strict. He firmly argues that you cannot combine knowledge and action simultaneously. It is philosophically impossible.
Wait, why is it impossible?
Because they require two mutually exclusive mental states. If you truly fully know the self, if you have internalized that you are the infinite non-acting witness, the concept of duty evaporates entirely.
Oh, I see. You cannot simultaneously hold the thought, I am the infinite non-acting self, and the thought, I am Arjuna, and I must shoot this arrow to win back my kingdom.
Exactly. The realization of the first destroys the reality of the second.
Okay, but for someone like Arjuna, or for anyone listening to this right now trying to navigate their daily life,
Yeah.
you can't just declare yourself a monk of perfect realization and drop all your responsibilities.
Right, you can't fake it.
And the text explicitly says that abandoning action is physically impossible for the unenlightened. Even maintaining your biological body breathing, eating, your heart beating, all of that requires action. You are trapped in a machine driven by nature.
Exactly. Renunciation is not achieved by just physically stopping an activity. If Arjuna drops his bow and sits in the forest, but his mind is still churning with guilt, anger at his cousins, and a bruised ego.
He hasn't really renounced anything.
No, he is just practicing repressed action. Sitting still while your mind races is not the inaction of the self.
So what is the solution? If we are stuck in the machine of the body and we can't fake enlightenment by just sitting still, how do we get out?
The solution is karma yoga, the yoga of action.
Let's unpack the mechanics of karma yoga, because it is arguably the most practical, daily applicable philosophy in the entire text.
It really is. It's about performing your obligatory duties, but doing so with a radical psychological shift.
The mechanism of karma yoga relies on severing the link between the action and the result, right?
Yes. You perform the duty, whether it's fighting a battle, doing your job, or raising a family, but you must do it without attachment to the fruits of that action.
And crucially, you dedicate all the actions to the Supreme Bhagavan, acknowledging that the universe, not your ego, is the ultimate orchestrator.
Right.
The text has this mind-bending phrase, he who finds inaction in action. How does acting without ego actually lead to freedom? What is mechanically happening in the mind when you do that?
It comes down to how karma functions. Every time we take an action driven by a selfish motive, whether it's greed, fear, or a desperate desire for a specific outcome, it leaves a latent impression on the mind.
Like a psychological groove.
Exactly. This reinforces the ego, cementing the false idea that I am the doer and I need this result to be happy.
It's an endless feedback loop.
But karma yoga hacks the loop. When you act solely because it is the righteous duty in front of you, and you completely surrender the outcome to the universe, the action no longer generates those binding impressions.
You are essentially starving the ego of its fuel.
Yes. You burn up past karma and purify the internal organ, the mind. You are preparing the mind's mirror to be clean enough to finally reflect that ultimate flesh of lightning knowledge of the self.
I always try to visualize this with sports. Think about playing a highly competitive game of tennis.
Okay, yes.
If you are terrified of losing, if your entire ego is attached to the scoreboard, you tense up, you hesitate, you suffer through every lost point.
Because your mind is in the future on the result.
Exactly. But if you can somehow detach completely from the outcome, if you focus purely on the mechanics of the swing, the joy of the movement, entering a complete flow state, you actually play your best game.
Right.
You are intensely active on the outside, sprinting across the court. But internally, there is a profound stillness. You are acting, but you are not bound by the action.
That analogy highlights the state perfectly. Karma yoga is taking that flow state and expanding it to encompass your entire life.
Wow.
For Arjuna, it means he must pick up his bow and fight, but he cannot fight out of hatred for Duryodhana. He cannot fight out of a desire to wear a crown. He must fight simply because it is the duty placed before him by the cosmos, remaining internally untouched whether he lives, dies, wins, or loses.
But wait, if I have to completely detach from the outcome, what do I actually attach to? Like, how does a normal person realistically surrender all their actions to the cosmos? It sounds kind of dry and abstract.
And that is exactly why the text doesn't stop at Karma Yoga. This is the perfect bridge into Chapter 12, which focuses on Bhakti Yoga, or the path of devotion.
All right, I was hoping we'd get to this. Because Chapter 12 shifts the focus from this intense, abstract vision to something much more accessible. Devotion.
Yes. Arjuna actually asks a brilliant question here. He basically says, okay, some people worship the unmanifest, formless, imperishable reality, this abstract, non-dual self, and others worship you as a personal god with love and devotion. Which way is better?
Which is a great question. Formless void versus personal God. What does Krishna say?
Krishna says both paths are valid and both lead to the same ultimate goal. But, and this is a huge but, he says worshiping the formless, unmanifest reality is incredibly difficult for embodied beings.
Because we have bodies, so we naturally relate to things with forms.
Exactly. It's much harder to pour your heart out to an abstract concept. So Krishna assures him that bhakti devotion to the personal God is the simplest, most direct, and most accessible path for the vast majority of seekers.
It makes spirituality accessible through love and surrender, rather than just raw intellectual willpower.
Yes. And Shankaracharya, even as a strict non-dualist, completely supports this. His perspective is that bhakti purifies the heart. Devotion prepares the mind for that ultimate knowledge and realization of Brahman.
So bhakti isn't separate from knowledge, it's the bridge to it.
Beautifully said. Yes.
And Krishna lists the qualities of a true devotee in this chapter, right? It's not just about doing rituals.
Far from it. The ideal devotee is described as having humility, compassion for all beings, forgiveness, complete detachment from pain and pleasure, and a steadfast mind.
It's essentially a list of how to be an incredibly well-adjusted, loving human being. Modern resonance here is huge devotion as love, service, and surrender, way beyond just ancient rituals.
Absolutely. It's the heart's surrender leading to freedom. It softens the ego so that the deeper philosophical truths can actually take root.
Okay, so if Karma Yoga burns our latent psychological impressions, and Bhakti Yoga softens and purifies the heart, what exactly is this purified mind supposed to look at?
Now we step into Chapter 13.
Right. What is the actual reality sitting underneath all these mental gears? Chapter 13 dissects reality into two distinct categories, the field and the knower of the field.
This breakdown is where Advaita Vedanta gets incredibly analytical. It asks you to forensically examine your own experience.
Okay.
First, it defines the field, or Kurukshetra. Now, conventionally, if someone asks what you are, you point to your physical body, and the body is certainly part of the field.
But the text goes so much deeper than just flesh and bone. I mean, it lists the physical elements and the senses, yes, but it also categorizes the mind, the ego, and this is the real paradigm shift, internal modifications like desire, pleasure, pain, and fortitude as part of the field.
This is a crucial pivot. Why are your desires and pains considered part of the field? Because they are objects. They are phenomena that can be observed.
If you can observe a feeling of sadness arising in you, then you cannot fundamentally be that sadness. You are the subject observing the object.
Yes. And that subject is the second category, the satrajna, the knower of the field, the conscious witness.
The witness.
Exactly. But here is where Shankaracharya introduces the radical twist that separates his non-dualism from other philosophies. You might logically assume, okay, I have my knower in my field and you have your knower in your field. We are a universe of billions of individual souls.
Which sounds completely reasonable.
But Shankaracharya categorically rejects that. He argues that the knower of the field within you is absolutely identical to the Supreme Bhagavan. There is only one knower across all fields.
Wait, I need to push back on that logic. How can he claim there's only one knower when we all clearly have totally different experiences?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're thinking right now.
Right, but that's because difference and multiplicity can only exist where there are features or boundaries.
What do you mean?
If consciousness, the ultimate witness, has no form, no boundaries, and no changing qualities, how could you possibly distinguish one witness from another?
Oh, I see.
The differences we perceive are entirely in the fields, different bodies, different memories, different brain chemistries. But the pure light of awareness illuminating those different fields is singular.
The sources provide some really beautiful analogies to help visualize this. The commentary talks about the single sun. Just as one sun illumines the entire physical world, the one knower illumines all bodies.
Right.
My favorite, though, is the analogy of space inside a jar.
Oh, that one perfectly illustrates the concept of being untouched.
Yeah. So if you have a clay jar and it's filled with dirt, the space inside the jar isn't dirty. Space is a subtle element. It permeates the jar, but it cannot be defiled by the dirt within it.
And if the jar shatters, the space doesn't break.
Exactly. In the same way, the self, the knower, permeates the physical body, but it is never defiled by the body's actions, nor is it damaged when the body dies.
The text expands on this illusion of a separate material world by using the metaphor of the upside-down tree.
Which is such a trippy image.
It describes the cosmic illusion, or Maya, the entire matrix of cause and effect, as an upside-down people tree. Its roots are firmly planted above in the supreme reality, but its branches grow downwards, manifesting as the material world we interact with, nourished by the elements of nature.
And the instruction given to Arjuna is that to be free, you cannot just prune the leaves of this tree. You must cut it down completely with the strong sword of detachment.
Meaning you must completely sever your false identification with the branches. The physical body, the social roles, the ego. You must relocate your sense of identity back to the root, to the knower.
This is a totally matrix-breaking concept, but I have to ask the obvious question that I'm sure anyone listening is screaming right now.
Go ahead.
If I am the supreme, if I am this untouched, singular knower, why do I feel pain when I stub my toe? Why do I feel the heartbreak of losing a loved one? It feels incredibly real and intensely personal to me. It doesn't feel like I'm just observing a cloud pass by.
Shankaracharya absolutely anticipates this resistance. The answer provided is profound, though deeply challenging. It is because of a mechanism called adhyasa, or superimposition, which is born of ignorance.
Superimposition.
Yes. Through a beginningless ignorance, you have superimposed the identity of the knower onto the field.
You literally think you are the toe.
Exactly. The pain in the toe is a real physical event within the field. The nerve endings fire, the spinal cord transmits the signal, the brain registers the sensation. All of that physical machinery is real.
Of the suffering.
The suffering, the psychological agony arises because the knower falsely assumes the posture of the ego and says, "This is happening to me. I am damaged." If you truly rested in the state of the knower, you would observe the pain in the toe the exact same way you observe a fire burning in a fireplace.
Wow.
It is an intense event occurring in the field, but it fundamentally does not touch the witness.
Okay. Assuming we can wrap our heads around being this pure, untouched witness, it begs another massive question.
Yeah.
If at our core we are all this singular, radiant, divine consciousness, where does the darkness come from?
Right, the origin of evil.
Yeah. Why is the world full of such terrible behavior? Why are CEOs ruthlessly exploiting workers for bonuses? Why are politicians starting wars? If we share one divine knower, what is the mechanism that generates evil?
The text tackles this head-on in chapter 16 by categorizing human behavior into two broad types, the divine and the demoniacal, and it offers a scathing psychological profile of the demoniacal nature.
It really does not mince words. It describes individuals driven by insatiable passion, vanity, and arrogance. It says they adopt bad objectives due to delusion.
And there is a specific phrase in the translation that is just chilling.
Oh, the shackles one. Yeah, this says they are bound by hundreds of shackles in the form of hope, and they amass wealth through foul means, walking around thinking, I am the Lord, I am successful.
Shackles in the form of hope. It is a brilliant, haunting diagnosis. We usually think of hope as a positive thing.
Right, like keep hope alive.
But here, hope is a chain. It is the endless, desperate desire for more. It's the delusion that the next acquisition, the next victory, the next pile of wealth will finally fill the void and bring lasting satisfaction.
But because the passion is rooted in the unreal, which, as we established, is constantly changing, it is by definition insatiable. When I read about the shackles of hope and the drive to think I am successful, I am the Lord, it honestly felt like an ancient psychological teardown of modern hustle culture.
Oh, 100%.
Like the toxic grind where your entire worth is tethered to your output, and you're constantly hoping that the next promotion, the next big purchase will finally make you happy. It's an ancient diagnosis of modern burnout.
It maps perfectly onto modern anxieties. But the text doesn't just describe these behaviors. It explains the underlying physics of why human minds operate this way. It introduces the mechanical gears of nature known as the 3 Gunas.
Let's dissect the Gunas, because this explains how the field actually operates day to day.
Right. The gunas are the three fundamental qualities or strands that weave together to make up all of nature, or prakriti. Everything in the physical and psychological world is a fluctuating mixture of these three forces: sattva, rajas, and tamas.
How does Tamas operate?
Tamas is the quality of ignorance, inertia, and darkness. It is heavy, deluding, and stagnant. A tamasic mind, according to the text, refuses to give up sleep, fear, grief, and despair.
It is the energy of depression, laziness, and a stubborn refusal to see the truth.
Yes.
And what happens when the gear shifts to rajas?
Rajas is the quality of passion, frantic activity, and restlessness. It is the engine of desire. The text describes a rajasic intellect as one that holds firmly onto wealth and covetable things, constantly craving the fruits of its actions.
It's the energy of ambition, yes, but also of greed, stress, and conflict. It binds you relentlessly to the cycle of action and reward.
Exactly. The demoniacal individuals we discussed are heavily dominated by rajas and tamas.
That leaves sattva. Well, it sounds like the goal rush.
Sattva is the quality of purity, light, and harmony. A sattvic mind is clear, calm, and capable of deep focus.
The text says a sattvic intellect is one that can see a single, undivided, eternal entity in all diverse things. It is the quality that naturally leans towards spiritual knowledge, compassion, and bhakti.
But, and this is a huge philosophical twist, even sattva is a trap, ultimately.
Wait, really?
Yes, this is where Advaita Vedanta is so uncompromising. The goal of the spiritual seeker is absolutely to cultivate sattva, to calm the chaotic mind. But ultimately, you must transcend all three gunas entirely.
Why? If sattva is good and pure, why transcend it?
Because even sattva binds you. It binds you with a golden chain instead of an iron one, but it's still a chain. It binds you to the egoic identity of being a wise person or a spiritual person. The true self, the knower, is entirely beyond all three gunas.
Wow. Which brings us to chapter 18, the ultimate climax of this immense dialogue. Arjuna has been taken on this cosmic journey.
He really had.
He's had his moral arguments dismantled. He's learned about the changeless self, the paradox of karma yoga, the path of bhakti, the mechanics of the field and the knower, and the gears of the gunas. But now he asks for the final, practical bottom line. What does ultimate renunciation actually look like?
This is the critical debate between two concepts, sannyasa and tyaga. Arjuna wants a clear distinction because both words loosely translate to renunciation in English.
And Krishna draws a very sharp line between them.
He does.
Sannyasa is defined as the physical renunciation of actions. This is traditional monasticism. It means leaving society, giving up your family, your job, and your social obligations to dedicate yourself entirely to contemplation in a cave somewhere.
Whereas tyaga is the relinquishing of the fruit of all actions. This is the culmination of the karma yoga we discussed.
So you remain in the world, you act, you fight, you work, but you completely abandon the desire for the personal reward.
Exactly.
But the ultimate destination, what the text calls naiskarmya siddhi, is the supreme perfection of being completely free from duties. How is a person supposed to achieve that state while still breathing and living in society?
The text says it's achieved when the intellect is unattached, the internal organs are conquered, and one is utterly desireless.
And here is the crowning insight of Shankaracharya's entire commentary. He emphasizes a point that completely upends how we usually think about spiritual seeking.
It's his most radical point.
He argues that knowledge, the ultimate realization of the self, does not create liberation.
Right.
That sounds completely counterintuitive. I mean, if I study this text, if I practice attachment and devotion, aren't I building my liberation step by step?
No, because liberation is not a product. It is not something manufactured by your spiritual efforts, your meditation, or your good deeds.
Why not?
If liberation were created, it would have a beginning. And as we learned earlier, anything with a beginning is unreal and must eventually end. The true self is already free. It has always been free.
So what does spiritual practice actually do then?
Knowledge simply removes the ignorance that was obscuring what was already there.
Oh, there's a classic analogy used in Vedanta to explain this epistemological shift, and we have to explore it because it makes this abstract concept so tangible. The analogy of the rope and the snake.
It is the perfect illustration of how ignorance operates.
Okay, so imagine you are walking down a dimly lit path at dusk. You look down and see a coiled shape on the ground. Immediately, your mind projects the image of a snake.
Your heart races, adrenaline floods your system, you prepare to fight or flee. You are experiencing profound, very real suffering and fear.
Then someone walks by with a lantern and shines a light on the ground, and you see It's just a piece of coiled rope.
Exactly. Now, analyze what just happened. Did the light of the lantern create the rope?
No, the rope was always there.
Did the light destroy the snake?
No, because there never was a snake to begin with.
Right. The snake only ever existed in your ignorant projection. The lantern didn't manufacture a new reality. It simply destroyed the ignorance, revealing the reality that was always present.
That is so profound.
In the exact same way, the knowledge of the self doesn't build a state of liberation. It simply shines a light that destroys the false superimposition of the ego, the terrifying illusion that I am this mortal body. It reveals the infinite freedom that was your true nature all along.
This means ultimate freedom isn't about escaping to a cave in the Himalayas. It is a fundamental, radical shift in identity. You drop the illusion of the agent, the one who needs to achieve or protect, and you simply rest in the truth of being the witness.
Yes. And this profound shift is what allows Krishna to give his final, most sweeping instruction to Arjuna. After all the complex philosophical breakdowns, Krishna simply says, "Abandoning all rights and duties, take refuge in me alone. I shall free you from all sins. Do not grieve."
Do not grieve. I mean, we started this deep dive with Arjuna weeping in his chariot, completely overwhelmed by sorrow and paralyzed by his fear of committing a sin. After shining the lantern of this philosophy on his mind, what is the result?
Arjuna declares that his delusion is destroyed. He says he has regained his memory.
And he doesn't mean his memory of the past, like what he had for breakfast. He means the deep foundational memory of his true nature as the knower. The text describes it beautifully. The knot of the heart gets untied. So he picks up his bow, not out of a rajasic desire for power and not out of tamasic anger at his cousins. He picks it up ready to act as a pure, unattached instrument of the cosmos.
The external circumstance, the horrific reality of the impending war hasn't changed one single bit. The armies are still waiting. But Arjuna has changed completely. He is no longer bound by it.
It is a complete internal revolution. He has stepped out of the illusion of agency and into the freedom of the witness.
It really is.
And that wraps up our deep dive today. We've traveled from an ancient, dust-choked battlefield into the deepest, most complex mechanics of the human psyche.
We've explored how identifying with the ever-changing field traps us in sorrow, and how realizing our true nature as the eternal knower can sever the shackles of hope and fear.
And we saw how devotion is really the heart's surrender, leading right to that freedom.
The ultimate lesson Shankaracharya leaves us with is that our greatest enemy isn't an opposing army, but our own false identification with our passing thoughts, our anxieties, and the physical machine of the body.
So true. Before you go, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to mull over as you navigate your own day. The text claims that the Supreme Being is seated in the heart of all creatures, revolving them as though they are mounted on a machine, driven by the gears of their own nature.
A powerful image.
The next time you find yourself standing on the front lines of your own life, when you feel completely overwhelmed by your obligations, your fear of failure, or your desperate desire for a specific outcome, I want you to pause. Look at the situation and ask yourself, are you the machine churning blindly through the motions of panic and desire, or are you the silent, untouched witness simply watching the gears turn?
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of reality.
We'll see you next time. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll be back soon to dive into our next set of sources.